Hello.
Hello.
All right. Hello, Nakribu Kwenye. Hello and welcome in Swahili to the Dominique Wong Weekend Show, where we have grassroots conversations about current affairs in Malaysia and for tonight in Uganda as well. It is currently 4 p.m. in the afternoon in Uganda and 9 p.m. in the evening in Malaysia. Today we have a very special guest, Angela Mugale, who is a trainee solicitor as well as ambassador for the Young East African Aspiring Lawyers Network in Kampala, Uganda, who is kind enough to share with us valuable insights into culture and current affairs in Uganda as well as East Africa. We are so excited to meet you. If any of you watching are fans of me and Angela, please like, share, leave a comment. I'm sure Angela will be delighted to answer to them. We'll try to keep it as interactive as possible and sharing photos as well, in spite of the video connectivity issue we had earlier. So firstly, to start off, would you like to introduce your background, how it is like growing up in Uganda, Angela?
Terima kasih, Dominique. Hello, Dominique, and hello, viewers. Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor. I'd like to start off by apologizing for the technical issues on my end. My webcam has not been on its best behavior, for lack of a better word, but nevertheless, we move, and I promise that I will deliver something noteworthy despite this. So, in any case, to begin with, I am a 20-something lawyer pursuing my bar in Uganda. I was born in Uganda and bred in East Africa. So, Dominique, growing up in Uganda was such a colorful experience in many, many ways. My memories are filled with sunshine, food, copious amounts of laughter, family, and a fair amount of nights out between you and I.
Yes. Oh my God. I agree with that as well.
You do? I love to
Do
hear
you
it.
do you always grow up in Kampala? Do you grow up in any rural regions around Kampala in Uganda? Do you grow up elsewhere as well? Maybe you can kindly share.
Of course, of course. Um, I think I would consider myself a regional baby. Uh, yes, I was born in Kampala, Uganda, at Mulago Hospital, to be exact. And for the better part of my childhood, um, I was in Uganda. That's where I spent my formative years. However, when I was clocking maybe 16 or 17, I got a chance to go to Kenya for my A levels, and I took it. I took it by the horns. So Kenya did play a huge part in my maturing and development. I spent maybe 2, 3 good years there. So I would say that within the region, Uganda and followed by Kenya molded me. But I do hope that in the coming years, I will do even more of my growing in different regions of in different countries of the region. So help me God.
Yes, I think you've done so much for yourself, qualifying as a lawyer
Oh,
very soon,
that's quite
as well
kind.
as growing up in Uganda and Kenya and perhaps the United Kingdom as well. Maybe you could share some of your personal background. What do your parents work as, and what are your favorite hobbies? And growing up in Uganda.
Yes, yes, of course. So my father happens to be a a lawyer. So the apple did not fall far from the tree, in any way. And my mother is an agricultural economist. And Dominique, I believe that you have a similar background as well. I recall you telling me that at least one of your parents is a lawyer.
Yes.
Um, Yes, yes, there's so much in common. And then in regard to my hobbies, within Uganda, I really, really do enjoy eating out. Eating is a very huge priority in Uganda. People do enjoy
Likewise in
to
Malaysia.
yes, yes. When you do have the disposable income, eating out is a very, very big thing to do out here. So I do quite enjoy that. I really, really enjoy swimming. I really enjoy doing yoga. Because it's such a green nation, so it's quite conducive for yoga as a form of keeping physically fit. I enjoy riding bicycles around the neighborhood, and also a bit of gardening here and then, making flower arrangements. If I
Yes,
may
I think
say.
many of us share the same hobbies like bicycling, gardening, eating out.
Yes,
These are prime time Malaysian hobbies as well. So, like you mentioned, like previously, I think having so much in common despite being so far away, Malaysia and Uganda, I think is something to
yes,
celebrate. On that
yes,
note, to start off, would you like to share the history and geography of Uganda and East Africa?
yes, yes, yes. Of course. Well, Uganda and East Africa has an extremely, extremely, extremely rich history. East Africa is one of the, if not the oldest, one of the oldest parts of the globe. Actually, it's been famously referred to as the cradle of mankind by anthropologists and explorers alike. Geography-wise, Uganda is a pretty cozy nation. We currently have a modest population of about 45 million, according to recent UN statistics. But interestingly, Uganda has, despite its modest population, it has one of the fastest growing youth populations on the continent of Africa. And in terms of climate and weather, um, it's what is known as equatorial or tropical. And in my humble opinion, this climate is really and truly the best of both worlds because it's conducive for picnicking and agriculture. So what's not to like? You tell me.
Yes. What's the temperature like in Uganda?
Oh, the temperature. To put it in layman's terms, it's hot. HOT hot. But to be more specific, typically the temperatures range from maybe 25 degrees to maybe somewhere in the 30s. And I've been told that it's pretty similar in Malaysia as well.
Yes, exactly. We are 25 degrees Celsius at night and 30 degrees in the day. So very
Okay.
similar equatorial temperatures. We also have a very big tropical rainforest. I think that might be similar as well in Uganda.
Oh yes, 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 indeed. We do have quite a lot of rainforests that actually a lot of pharmaceutical companies come to mine certain species of plants, and then they end up using that in their medicines. But yeah, we do have really, really renowned rainforests, and we do guard them jealously by virtue of, for instance, the what's known as the NEMA, which is the National and Environmental Management Association, and also the Uganda Wildlife Authority.
Yes. Would you care to share maybe the geography of Uganda on the screen?
Yes, of course, I'd love to do that. If you can just give me just a moment to grab these beautiful pictures. There we go. Thank you so much. Yeah. So here we have Uganda, and as you can see, Kampala is based in the central region, and we have the Great Lake of Victoria, which happens to be shared by both Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, as you can see, and it's a pretty unique one because it's one of the few and the largest freshwater lakes on the entire globe. So we do have a lot of world-renowned mountains and crater lakes and national parks. We have, for instance, Queen Elizabeth National Park, Windy Forest Reserve, which is known for its primates such as the gorillas, a very endangered species. So we're extremely blessed. It's a very diverse place to have had the pleasure to grow up in.
Yes. Moving on to our next photo. So that is a. Oh, oh,
Oh yes.
yep.
Yes, and here we have the East African region, just to put things in better perspective. So you have up top. what is known as the Horn of Africa region, where you have Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. And then from the lower part of East Africa, we have Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Yes, so unfortunately, Uganda is a landlocked country. We weren't as lucky as, say, Tanzania or Kenya or even Malaysia, but nevertheless, we do the best with what we can, eh?
Yes, yes. I think from Malaysia, we always refer to East Africa as the Horn of Africa, cradle of
Yes,
civilizations, and also the Great Lakes region. So maybe you can talk about that as well. And
yes,
Mount
yes, yes, of course.
Kilimanjaro.
Oh, yes, I know that's one of your favorites, Dominique, and believe you me, I will take you there one of these fine days. Yes.
Working on it.
Yeah, so Mount Kilimanjaro is found in Kenya. It's famous for it's a snow-capped mountain. And actually, for those of you who might be Disney fans, it featured in The Lion King. It was one of the inspirations for the for the scenery in the Lion King. Um, yes, so
Kenya.
and that we do have Lake Victoria, as I said, which is shared amongst Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. But aside from that, I think we have a plethora of mountains and crater lakes and rivers and
Yes.
beautiful sandy beaches. For instance, Diani in Mombasa, and we also have pyramids to boast about. I think most people are under the impression that the pyramids are only located in Egypt, but in actual fact, there are what is known as the Nubian pyramids in South Sudan, which are extremely expensive. So pyramids, not just in Egypt, but come down to South Sudan and East Africa, and you can see our version, which is just as beautiful.
Definitely. Yes. I also think the Blue Nile, does it start in Lake Victoria and goes up to Khartoum and it ends in Egypt? Or the White
Yes,
Nile? With this?
I believe it's the Blue Nile.
Yes. So so the Blue Nile starts in Kampala, is that right? And then it goes all the
Yes,
way through Sudan into Egypt.
yes, I believe so.
Also, I think there's the Nilote people of the Nile. So I
Yes,
was thinking if they are originating from the north of Uganda or South Sudan, are they from this region?
yes, you're absolutely right. And because they're from that region, I mean, where you're born really does influence your traditional diet. So because they were born in close proximity to the Nile, their diet is greatly made up of a lot of gorgeous and divine fish dishes. Yes, they're very, very big on their fish dishes and seafood or something of the
Yes.
like. Yes. So, but aside from the Nilots, we have a ton of different other ethnic groups, and these include the Bantu, which is perhaps the most popular because of the huge numbers. I myself am a Bantu woman. But aside from the Bantu and the Nilots, you also have the Hamites and the Nilo Hamites. And sometimes people get ethnic groups mixed up with tribe, but in actual reality, first comes the ethnic group, and then within these ethnic groups, you have the tribe, and then within the tribe, you have the clan, right? And interestingly, within the clan, a lot of the time you can't intermarry with someone who is within your clan because you have a common ancestor. That's also something that's quite interesting. So when you go out and about, sometimes you've got to ask if someone's you don't want to get mixed up. You've got to ask if someone is maybe from a particular clan, just to make sure that you're not mingling with someone who could be your long lost brother or sister.
Yes. What are the cultural differences? Because you mentioned there's ethnic groups on the highest end, then you have
Okay.
a tribes, and then you have on the bottom end a clan. So what are the differences? So you mentioned four. So you have like Bantu people, you have a
Hmm.
Nilot people, as you have also mentioned two more other ethnic groups. How do you
Never.
segment them?
I think the key differences come from the regions that these people ended up settling in. Because, well, I believe some would argue that humanity began in East Africa, um, somewhere in Tanzania. So at first, everybody was sort of concentrated there, but then these different groups ended up scattering themselves across Africa. So different groups settled in different regions and formed similar but different cultures. So, like I said, you might know some people by virtue of, to an extent, how they look, because the region that these groups settled in also affected the manner in which their bodies evolved or even mutated. So, for instance, you might have the Dinka warrior in Sudan, and people usually know them because they are tall like skyscrapers and they have really, really rich ebony skin, which dark ebony skin. So the reason why, for instance, those people are tall in that manner is because it helps their bodies keep cool. And the reason their skin is that dark is because they come from an extremely hot region. So sometimes you can sort of notice those little differences, like, okay, this person, we'll know this person is from this group because they look this way. And why do they look that way? It's because of the climate of the region that their people happen to settle in. But aside from physical looks, you have the diet, which is also informed by the region that the said people have settled in, and also language. The languages can be quite similar but quite different as well. So that's how we've sort of learned how to segment ourselves. Maybe starting off with physical features, language, diet, even traditional dances, and also traditional clothing. Yeah. So I hope that puts things into better perspective.
Thank you. So you mentioned the ethnic groups. Bantus come from the southern part of Buganda Kingdom, and the Nilotes are from the northern part. And you also mentioned a very tall ethnic group. So where do these ethnic groups come from? The smaller ethnic groups that you mentioned.
The Hamites.
The
Sorry, the Nilo
Hamites.
Hamites. Yes, the Nilo Hamites are not too far off from the River Nile as well. And then, in regard to the Hamites, I believe that they originated more from the northern Africa. Yes, according to my research, and trickled down. But typically, within Uganda, the Hamites are found more in Western Uganda, such as the Banyankole tribe.
Okay. So we have talked
Yeah.
about the different ethnic groups in Uganda, some of the different geographies in Uganda. So we also talk about the languages in Uganda. What is the official language of Uganda, and what are the languages you speak between different ethnic groups in Uganda?
So we don't, unlike many nations, we don't have an official language per se. The lingua franca is English. Um, Perhaps you would say the unofficial official language is Swahili, because that is the most widely spoken language in the region. Um, Swahili, just to cast our minds back to the days of yore, it happens to be a mix of Bantu languages and Arabic. And why Arab? Why Arabic? This is because in the in the late 20th century, um, Arabs used to come and trade on the coast. So, one thing leads to another, intermarriage, intermingling of cultures, and thus Swahili as a language was born. So Swahili is extremely prominent in the region. So after Swahili, in Uganda, I would say Luganda is comes next in terms of being widely spoken. It's widely used in trade. But aside from that, many other languages are commonly spoken, such as Nyankole, Ruchiga, and the like.
Okay.
Yes,
So you
yes, yes.
mentioned the most common language is English, Swahili, Luganda, as well as other languages as well.
Yes,
And
yes, indeed.
Runyankore. How do you pronounce that? Runyankore?
You've got it. You've got it.
Runyankore. Oh my God. I'm so excited to
Yeah,
learn it
I got
now.
A stuff for you. You know, you can come and I can teach you at any point. Open invitation.
All right.
Kampala
So
to Kuala Lumpur.
I'm going to share some photos of Uganda that were listed as question two. Maybe you can discuss what are these photos on the screen. I'll go through them slowly.
Of course, I'd love to. Uh, hmm. Just a moment. Just a moment. Um, beg your pardon. Yes. All right. So here we have Windy uh, National Park. It's one of the most. So I've heard. I haven't had the pleasure of going, but I've heard it's one of the most breathtaking places to go to in Uganda. As you can see, it's very green, very lush, and yeah, based on just how comfortable that gorilla is looking, I think it really is worth a trip. And yes, it's one of the places that houses the gorillas, which as many of you might know, is a very endangered species. So we're proud to say that we've created safe havens for these animals. Coexistence is really, really key, as you know. So we do try to coexist as much as we can in Uganda.
Yes, I think it is the same in Malaysia. I think
Yes,
the ape, we have a orang utan, which is one of the
the
four great apes. That's a
orangutan.
national animal of Malaysia as well. And then I
Really?
think for wildlife in Uganda, so you have the Ugandan kob, is that right? And then you have the mountain gorillas.
Yeah.
Are these your national animals as well?
Yes, actually. So Malaysia has the orangutan on the which is the national. You know, it's very. You think orangutan, you think Malaysian symbolism. On our side, we have the crested crane, which is a on the Ugandan flag, and if any of you have seen a crested crane, it tends to stand with one leg up, and the common myth is that the minute that the crested crane puts its leg down, that means Uganda has stopped moving forward. So food for thought.
Yep. I hope they keep their legs up.
Better keep that leg up, crested crane. Don't let us decide down. Yes. And so here we have a gorgeous, gorgeous Habesha woman. These group of people hail from Ethiopia. So I just wanted to put this picture in particular just to illustrate the diversity of the peoples in East Africa. I've had the pleasure of traveling here and there, and I can honestly say that I don't think I've seen as much diversity in terms of human aesthetics. As I have in East Africa, you'll have someone who is, like I said, the Dinka warrior, extremely tall, ebony skin, and then within the same region, you'll have a lady who looks like this, maybe looser hair texture, fairer skin. Then you'll have, pygmies and so on and so forth. So yes, very, very, very diverse region when it comes to aesthetics of the human.
Yes, I think
Mm.
I see. I looked it up. Habesha people are from Ethiopia, highlands of Ethiopia,
Yes,
and
yes, yes, they are.
The Dinka people
The
are from South
Sudan.
Sudan.
Yes, quite
Okay.
right. Quite right. Quite right. Yes. So if I may ask, do you have perhaps the same in Malaysia? I know they're the Chinese Malaysians, and what kind of groupings do you have, if any, in
Oh, we
Malaysia?
we are a multiracial country, likewise,
Of
and
course. Yes.
we are probably like 55% ethnic Malay. So that's Austronesian. They share the same ethnic
Okay.
lineage, even with people from Madagascar, in fact, and the Pacific Islands. So it's a very wide area of Southeast
Wow.
Asia. And then you have the Chinese. like myself, so that we make up 25%, 24%, and then ethnic Indians make up 7%. And so Malaysia has east and west. So the east side is Borneo Island, and the west side is called
Okay.
Peninsula. So we have
Oh,
indigenous
and where do
people.
you hail from
That's where
in Malaysia? Where do you
yeah,
hail from in Malaysia?
I'm from Kuala Lumpur, so that's in West Malaysia,
Love
and that's in the
that.
center of West Malaysia. Yeah, so indigenous people make up 15%, and they come with colorful clothes and colorful wear. They form the dominant
Wow.
populations in the two states in East Malaysia. So yes, 32
Wow.
million people. I think maybe 10 million smaller than Uganda.
Oh, no, that's really interesting to learn. It's really interesting to learn.
Yeah,
And speaking of, yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny
Um,
because I think in 2000, I think Uganda had a population similar to Malaysia and like 23 million. So the past 20 years, Uganda has
Imagine.
jumped 45 million, double, and Malaysia has gone up by
It's,
half and to 32
I know it's
million.
pretty mind blowing. Like I said, one of the fastest growing youth populations on the continent, if not the world. So
Yes.
yeah, yep.
So,
It's quite something to see.
so you
Yeah.
mentioned just now the Bantu people, the Dinka people were really tall, and then the Habesha people as well. So maybe you can talk about the Maasai. Is that right?
Of course, of course. So the Maasai, so the Maasai are a group of people who are scattered all across Uganda, Tanzania, as well as Kenya. I'd be inclined to think that at one point they all resided in the same place, but the ramifications of post-colonialism. Unfortunately, when our nations were granted independence, a lot of these borders were redrawn. Some would say improperly, given hindsight. So you had a lot of splitting of ethnic groups, and you had, some groups that historically had bad blood being squeezed into the same place, and that's why sometimes you see a lot of these civil wars cropping up in let's say South Sudan. But just to sorry, I digress. So, but the Maasai are scattered all across Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. They're known for their colorful, vivacious clothing. As you can see, they tend to wear a red blanket over
Okay.
themselves, and they tend to be very, very adventurous with their piercings. They pierce their ears quite generously, and they make these really elaborate pieces of jewelry, as you can see. Actually, let me just try putting on my camera briefly because I'm actually wearing a piece of of Masai jewelry, maybe that I could
Yes,
show off.
yes,
Um,
yes.
before my camera is in and out, but I'll just try. So as you can see, this is a
Wow.
piece of, that's a piece
Wow.
of Masai jewelry over here.
Yes,
So
we see it. We see it.
supporting them as well. And these pieces of jewelry are extremely popular. They've actually featured in a lot of runways in Europe, believe it or not. Yes.
So the Maasai culture has been gentrified and being used
It's
as part of
some would
high
say.
fashion. Yes, and some would say they have not contributed enough to local communities.
No, some would say, I mean, yes, and unfortunately, it works that way sometimes, but regardless of, it's really nice to see when your culture is being exported to the world, and 'cause sometimes Africa gets a bit of a bad rap. What you see on the news is just carnage when it comes to how Africa is portrayed. So at the end of the day, sometimes it's just really nice when what's exported to the world is that Africa is beautiful, and in this case, it has been in the form of these ornamental pieces of jewelry. So it's corrective promotion, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing some of the costumes and different peoples that inhabit East Africa. I think I've learned so much about different people.
Of
Moving
course.
on, maybe we can talk about the food. What is the special food in Uganda and East Africa?
I would love to do that. Food is my middle name, in case you in case you want to aware. So yes, our food is extremely organic. So as we have on the screen we have my staple food. I come from central Uganda, from a tribe called the Baganda, and this is our staple food in particular. It's essentially a steamed plantain. We cook it in banana leaves, and as you've told me in the past in our conversations, this is also a common practice in Malaysia, using a lot of banana leaves and weaving them into the cuisine, and it's really healthy because it's 100% water. It's extremely healthy. Yes, but aside from matoke, we tend to have another dish called luombo, which is a popular accompaniment with matoke. It's essentially a meat stew cooked in banana leaves. And here we have one of my favorites. There we go. That's the luombo. As you can see, it's very healthy looking, and also we also eat what a dish called nyama choma, which in Swahili literally means burnt meat. There we have it. But believe you me, you'll be sold just after one taste. It's extremely delicious, and it's quite similar to a South African dish called braai. Yes, because they do a lot of barbecue as well. So this could be considered our version of a braai. But yes, aside from that, we have other dishes that we eat that we borrowed from other cultures, such as pilau and chapati. Um, Pilau came with the Arab traders that came to trade circa 20th century, like I mentioned, and chapati came with the Indian Asians, who at one point in time, long ago, traveled for greener pastures and found themselves in East Africa, and as a result, their cuisine ended up becoming intertwined with ours, and we're not complaining because we really do enjoy our chapati.
Yes, I like chapati as well. I think Indian food
You
has
do.
arrived in Malaysia, and like you first mentioned, banana leaf in Matuki. We use banana leaf to wrap our national dish. It's called nasi lemak. So that's coconut rice, fried
Nasi
anchovies,
lemak.
chili paste. Yes, exactly. So it used to be
Ooh.
because Malaysia is a maritime country, so we used to have a lot of traders, a lot of seafarers.
Okay.
So our cuisine is quite seafood based. So that's why you have like fried anchovies. And so nasi lemak is a boiled coconut rice with chilies, hard boiled egg, fried anchovies and peanuts, and then they wrap it in a banana leaf. So
Okay.
that it reminds me of matuki, like you mentioned, it's a banana leaf but with plantain.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, so I was just wondering because like you mentioned matoki, lovombo, and
Mm.
as well nyama choma. So where are these
Yes.
geographically specific, like different parts of Uganda? Is it from the east side or the west side, the north?
So Matoke is more from the central region of Uganda. Then towards the west, where the Hamites, such as the Banyankole, reside, you have a dish that is called kalo, which is made with millet. It's a millety sort of dish. Yeah, so that's extremely delicious as well. Um, and then you do have dishes that just cut across, such as nyama choma, that's enjoyed in Kenya as much as it is in Uganda. You have dishes like pilau, which are enjoyed across the board as well. Then you also have a dish called ugali, which is the same thing, but maybe carries different names in different countries of the region. So it's essentially maize flour um, made into a sort of starch, sort of like pretty solid starch. You get the flour, mix it in with some water, and mix it until it solidifies. So in Uganda, it's known as posho. It can be
Oh,
eaten with beans. Yes, but then in Kenya, posho is it's called Ugali. So same thing but different names and maybe different texture. The Kenyan version is slightly softer. And interestingly, it's also eaten in Malawi,
Dang.
except that in Malawi it's called insima. Yes, I tried it by virtue of one of my Malawian aunties. So yes, it's so you do have some that are specific to certain parts of the nation, but yeah, and some that cut across. Um, yes,
Could
yes,
you
indeed.
summarize? So you mentioned the first three foods already. So what was that after matuki and nyama choma, as well
Luombo,
as luombo, and you mentioned ugali, and what's the other name for it? Portion.
portion, yeah, posho, but you can always have a good portion of posho. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, posho. Yes, yes,
Is
yep,
that
yep,
is
yep,
that
yep,
the
yep.
same place? Is that the same place? Ugali and posho.
Same dish, just the dish cuts across, but it's referred to as different things in different parts of the region. So the Ugandans call it posho, the Kenyans call it ugali. Same with
Okay.
yeah, so do the Tanzanians. They call it ugali as well. Yes, and then
Th-
in Congo they call it fufu, and in Malawi it's called insima.
okay. Wuhu and enzima. So that's like four
Yeah,
different names for the same dish.
for the same. Yep. Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you. Because
No, you're
it
more than
illustrates
welcome.
our topic question today. So Ugali, Swahili, and inside East Africa. So you have covered the Ugali part already. So moving
Yes,
on for our next
exhaustively.
question. You have mentioned so many different tribes and people, so many foods, and so many regions in East Africa and Uganda. Are there any conflicts between people of different backgrounds in Uganda?
Conflicts. They do crop up. They do crop up in all honesty. I think just by virtue of human nature, if I'm being philosophical. Some of the conflicts, aside from human nature, have been a result of, like I said, tribes that didn't have good history suddenly finding themselves in the same place by virtue of the redrawing of the borders after colonization. Um, so that's been a factor. Um, that's been a factor. Um, but sometimes the conflicts kind of rise from land wrangles or maybe cattle wrangles as well, because you have some tribes that are a bit more nomad than others. They're very passionate about their cattle keeping, so sometimes they might fight with neighboring tribes because they're both so passionate about these cattle, and sometimes it gets really violent. Actually, arms are involved, and you have to call in you know the UN and the like for peacekeeping. So the from time to time, the what's the word? The rows do occur, but for the most part, we are a very peaceful society. It's been observed by many that East Africans are generally a peaceful and gentle people, and may stay this way.
Yes,
Amen and amen.
if everyone have met Angela, they will agree.
You're far too kind.
So we have
Oh
talked
my.
about history, we talked about geography, food and culture. So now we're going to move on to the economy and current affairs. So in your own words, what is the state of the economy now since COVID-19 pandemic has hit Uganda?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, the pandemic has definitely done a huge amount of damage to the economy, left a huge dent in the coffers of the government, really drained national reserves because a lot of the things had to come to a standstill, and cash flow had was virtually becoming non-existent. So it's a bit of a shame because the economy wasn't in the best place, but the pandemic really exacerbated the state of affairs. Um, However, the government is, I believe, doing the best that they can to curb the aftermath of the pandemic through, for instance, ramping up job creation strategies and schemes, which focus heavily on boosting the private sector as well as attracting foreign investment. So,
what are the
in another, yes, carry on, please.
what are the main sectors of the economy? And for example, agriculture, manufacturing, or services?
Mm, in Uganda, I'd say that we have four main economic sectors, and those are agricultural, services, and industry. I beg your pardon, three economic sectors: agricultural, services, and industry. So I think agricultural is fairly straightforward, but when it comes to services, think hotel and tourism, transport and financial services. And as a matter of fact, the recent times have shown that it is the services sector that is swiftly becoming the backbone of the nation. Before it was more agriculture, but this is changing in present time. And interestingly, according to the Ugandan Bureau of Statistics, the services sector contributed the most to the nation's GDP for the fiscal year of 2019 to 2020, outstripping both the industry and agriculture sector. So actually, if you don't mind me asking, Dominique, in Malaysia, what is the most rewarding sector of the economy?
I think it's similar. I think generally countries who have an agricultural background, they try to move into industry, so that's producing and manufacturing. And then they try to go into
Okay.
services. And then I think it's the same in Malaysia. I think it's 55% services, because apparently services, financial services, professional services, things that
Mm,
come that with a profession and international in nature, consulting, all of this provide high value salaries and incomes to the country. So I think a lot
mm,
of countries try to move towards industry and services rather than agriculture. But I think this could be changing as well if people bring in technology to make
mm,
agriculture efficient and to harvest
mm.
even more output. I think agriculture should not be left behind and neglected, but more or
This is
less, I
it.
think we mirror or share the same attributes as Uganda. Yeah, services industry. We do have a national car as well. They are usually
Really?
yes.
Oh my
They are
goodness.
relatively cheaper in Malaysia than foreign makes. That's why they are more predominant, and I think they make up 50% of all cars on the roads in Malaysia, or maybe 40%. Yes, 40%. So that's
Wow,
the
wow,
Malaysian economy.
wow.
Um,
Interesting, interesting.
likewise, I think tourism makes up 10% of our GDP. So I
Okay.
think that has come to a halt, as well as I'm not in Uganda, so I think that as well about COVID, we had two national lockdowns, and the third one now
Yeah.
currently while I'm talking to you, we are experiencing a lockdown. It's called an enhanced movement
Yeah.
control order, and it's centered around the
Okay.
capital city of Kuala Lumpur and the industrial
Okay.
powerhouse state that surrounds it, Selangor. So they have locked down this area. So we are technically in third lockdown where I am, and it's
Wow.
creating a lot of damage because this area produces 30% of the national GDP. So
Wow.
so likewise, it's a tough time. So the government has
Oh.
given out cash handouts. ATMs are open, so people can still collect cash from the banks. But I think
Mm.
retail shops are suffering the most because they're not allowed to open during a lockdown. But restaurants can
Wow.
do delivery, and I think the only people doing well in Malaysia right now are tech companies, e-commerce, as well as grocery stores, because everyone's hoarding.
Wow. I mean, well, I mean, you can say a lot more for yourself. I think the only people, well, the only entities doing well here are the house pets, because everything is sort of, going down in the dumps. We're actually in a lockdown ourselves. coming nigh on a month. This is the second lockdown, the second national lockdown. I think it's a lot more restrictive than it is in Malaysia, because this time around it's nationwide. Private and public transport has been banned, save for exceptional circumstances. So, a lot of us have had to, get a lot fitter, a lot quicker than we had imagined. You've got to trek everywhere. And it has extremely paralyzed the economy for the most part, because, people are allowed to work, but how do they get to work? You know what I mean? But despite that shortfall, the government has been doing what they can in terms of distributing funds, as well, distributing funds to the vulnerable. So, nevertheless, we hope on and trust that tomorrow will be better than today.
Yes, because I realize the average salary in Uganda is quite low. How much is it, and how does for example COVID-19 affect the livelihoods of maybe short-term contract manual labor in Uganda?
Mm. Yeah, COVID has been pretty crippling when it comes to how it is that people make a living, and how it is that they're able to extract the fruits of their labor. So the average salary is 330,000 Uganda shillings, which is the equivalent of $100 per month. Um, but with the pandemic, a lot of people have found that salary being withdrawn altogether, or being chopped down by a pretty a pretty significant percentage. Um, so, like I said, some people are not earning whatsoever, um, but some people are earning a smaller amount of what is perhaps already considered to be a relatively modest amount of money earned per month.
Yes, I think the GDP per capita in Uganda is $817. That's a lower middle income GDP output. So that I think might have come under pressure during COVID-19, as well as I think in
Mm,
Uganda, yes, one of the world's highest fertility rates, maybe 5 or more children per woman, has rising population combined with the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown continue to put a strain on public services. Do you have examples on the ground?
uh, yes. It can definitely be argued that the rising population has placed a strain on public services. Unfortunately, the current economic infrastructure has failed to keep up with the influx of people in the nation. Like I mentioned earlier, extremely fast rising youth population. Um, so it's been quite disproportionate, I would say, in terms of how the government has accommodated the rising population. Um, you see that manifesting in um, for instance, people having qualifications to work, people having got fantastic degrees, people having the know-how, whether it's mental or physical, but them just not being able to find a job, any kind of job. It's extremely tight out here. Um, but nevertheless, like I said, with the job creation schemes, the government is trying to arrest this issue.
Yes. Despite some of the pressures and strains of COVID-19, I think there is still a silver lining. I think East Africa in 2019, the African Development Bank said East Africa is the fastest growing region on the continent. GDP forecast of
Woohoo!
5.9% in 2019. So the fastest growing country in East Africa was Rwanda in 2019, 8.7%.
Wow.
Ethiopia 7.4, Tanzania 6.8, and then followed by Uganda. So hopefully that we resume economic growth after the COVID-19, because if we have subsequent lockdowns as we have experienced in Malaysia, we might take a few
Yes.
years more of a U-shape rather than an instant V-shaped recovery. So I mean that's what
Yes.
that's what on everyone's mind, especially like young graduates who come out from school who have
Yes.
degrees not able to find jobs. So I think that's a global issue, not just in Uganda but in Malaysia. How can government support apprenticeships in the UK, or support internships and vocational training, on-the-job training to complement academic schools and graduates in Malaysia? So I'm just like putting up a few points. Do you have any comments on what I mentioned?
Yeah. What I will say is, the pandemic has been extremely crippling, but I think there really is hope, because it's also been a time of great innovation in so many ways. I mean, the Dominique Wong Weekend Show, amongst others. It's been a time of great
Yes.
innovation. It's been a time of great innovation, which I think will ultimately carry forward and actually reconcile matters and balance the scales in the future. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. It's been a time of innovation. So I think after the pandemic we'll see some pretty groundbreaking things that will, I think, steady a lot of our economies in
Yep.
whichever way will contribute to the steadyment of the economies.
Yep. Facts and figures aside, do you think the economy in Uganda will improve or has been improving for a while? What is the economic situation on the ground?
Like I said, on the ground, it's
Maybe
it's not
just
it's not
before COVID
very
and
encouraging
then COVID.
after COVID.
Yes.
Um, Before COVID, it was worse. The economy was in a recession,
Okay.
and now with COVID, I would say it's in a slump. Um, so from bad to worse. But nevertheless, the government is working aggressively to bolster the economy. Yes, I think that's what I will say about that.
Yes. Do you have any ideas for yourself? What do you think the government could do to alleviate poverty?
Um,
Extra.
yes, extra indeed. Well, well, I think they could do a better job of accountability, of ensuring that accountability mechanisms work. Perhaps revising some of the auspices that are put into place to monitor such matters of public expenditure. Um, I think that they could also pour more funds into bodies that are responsible for fighting corruption, because with poverty sometimes it's a lot of the time it stems from, like I said, mismanagement of funds or outright theft of funds. So some of these anti-corruption agencies could be further supported, whether through the media or through a direct injection of funds. For instance, the anti-corruption court, um, or even a greater legislation, or more acts could be put into place, or current acts in that fight corruption could be amended uh, for the better, so as to fight poverty by ensuring that whatever funds that are put towards alleviating that cause are justly spent. So I would say greater accountability, greater accountability.
Yes, good governance is an issue everywhere in the world. I think that's the same case in Malaysia. Do you think the government has an
Mhm.
economic plan? Do you have 10-year plans? Because in Malaysia we have 10-year development plans, just to tell the people and the investors what to look out for, which are the industries that we are focusing. I think in Malaysia, what we're trying to
Mm.
do is to expand our digital economy, which makes up 20% of economy. Um,
Okay.
we're also quite plugged in into the global electronic semiconductor supply chain. So those are computer chips. So when we have a COVID-19 lockdown the first time, I think some
Okay.
Malaysian components were absent from some of the computers that were needed across the world. So I mean, the fact that interconnectedness matters in the supply chain makes individual country lockdowns problematic for the smooth transition of the economy. So
Okay.
I think just I'm from the Malaysian experience, and I think from Rwanda's perspective, I heard Rwanda looks to Singapore as a kind of embodiment of a new post-colonial country with economic
Wow.
plans that's clean, that has an efficient, like everything you have mentioned, efficient government. I think that's what I think in Malaysia we are looking forward to, and also Rwanda and other countries trying to make the civil service work efficiently without graft and more accountability and transparency, just making sure public
Yes.
services reach everyone in the country, and just putting, I mean, that's the Malaysian and Singaporean experience, just having a government that earmarks heavy industries for investment by giving tax incentives. So this has been our
Mm.
experience. I'm not sure if you have a industrial plan or an economic plan on the top of your head, or an anti-poverty plan, or maybe giving out cash handouts. Do you have a social security net, for example? Do you think some of these ideas are being explored by the government in Uganda, Angela?
Um, I'm pretty confident that the ruling party of today has a 10-year similar plans in place. I'm pretty sure that because we recently had elections, so I'm pretty sure that some of these plans were part of their manifestos. However, it's one thing to plan, but it's a completely different thing to implement and execute. So my my prayer would be that these accountability mechanisms are strengthened to ensure that these plans, however watertight they may seem, actually come into fruition. Yes, but and in the meantime, we'll keep looking towards the wider world, countries such as Malaysia and Singapore, or even our neighbor in Rwanda, who is doing I think a lot better economically, I would say, for greater inspiration in terms of actually making sure that these plans don't just remain plans and they actually yield fruit.
Yes. I think many African countries, with the help of China as well, they are placing a focus on public investments into economic infrastructure, so ports and railways. So these are
Mm,
some of the methods of increasing long-term economic potential and GDP growth. But we'll come to
mm,
that. Those Chinese investments, we'll come to that later. We'll talk about a little bit more of politics and governance in Uganda. So the next
okay.
question I would like to ask, there is a black mark in Ugandan history that people like me in Malaysia would like to ask. So we all know that there was a dictatorship, a military dictatorship under President Idi Amin in 1971 for 8 years.
Okay.
Also, what was the experience like on the ground? What was it like to live under that experience? Maybe you have elder people who told you stories about it. How has it
Of
improved
course, of
now?
course. Well, personally, I couldn't tell you what it was like because I was just a twinkle in the universe. But I've heard from my parents and my grandparents it was an extremely, extremely, extremely oppressive time. Um, Civil liberties were extremely quashed. But interestingly enough, the economy was thriving. Unfortunately, when you look at pictures of Uganda back then and Uganda today, it seemed like it was a lot more of an organized society back then. Um, but I suppose no society is perfect. But just to answer your question, it was an extremely oppressive time. Civil liberties and human rights were abused heavily. Today, we live in a Uganda that is a lot more liberated. Um, there's always room for improvement, but the society that we live in today is nowhere near is nowhere near as draconian as it was back then. So we are extremely grateful in that regard. A lot of room for improvement, but we're grateful for the strides that we have made in terms of civil liberties.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm glad there has been material improvement in political civil liberties in Uganda as
Mm,
well, because many African countries experience one party or military rule. So the other question would be in February, I think this year, you had a presidential general elections that returned President Yoweri Museveni. How does general elections work in Uganda?
yes. Yes, indeed. We did have elections this year, and thankfully, they were peaceful. Worst comes to worst, you have maybe post-election violence, as there was in Kenya, um, say maybe 5 years ago. But just to bring it into a focus, in terms of the presidential elections, the president is elected using what is called a two-round system, with candidates needing to receive at least 50% of the vote to be elected in the first round. Um, so that's how the president is elected using the two-round system. But a lot of the time we have international bodies such as the UN or even the European Union that come in to monitor the elections to make sure that they are free and fair. However, because of the doctrine of state sovereignty, sometimes that's not always the case. It's always it's always up to the state. But because we enjoy peaceful relations with those two bodies, they are often, if not always, present to act as a watchdog. And this year they reported free and fair elections.
They declared it a free and fair election.
Yes, they did.
Yes, I think President Yoweri Museveni earned a popular vote of 58%, and then Bobby Wine of the NUP won 35%.
Oh, how do you know about Bobby Wine, Dominique? Have you been reading the
I
news?
I had to read the news. I'm meeting Angela tonight, so I was like wondering how do you contrast their party positions and how was the elections run? Yep. Because, for
Yes.
example, I'll give you Malaysia. Malaysia has a three levels of government. So there's local government, there's a state government, and there's a federal government. So when we go to
Yes.
elections, we removed the third branch at the lowest level in the 70s after a race riot. So we only elect for the state government and the federal government. So the federal government will be elected by the majority of MPs in the federal parliament. So yes, we vote for
Okay.
two people on the ticket. Yep. So in the parliament, the majority, the MP that commands the simple majority will be prime minister as appointed by the king of Malaysia.
Oh, I
So that's the
see. I see.
system.
Okay, that's pretty fascinating. That's pretty fascinating. Yes, so yes, you had Bobby Wine on one end representing the what is known as the NUP, and then you also had NRM, which is the party that our president belongs to. So the race was those are the main two contenders. So yes, I believe similar but rather different um, but as the UN reported, the elections were free and fair with the NRM coming out on top. But you should check out Bobby Wine's music. It's pretty, he's not just a politician. He's a man of many talents.
Pop,
So,
pop star.
yes, did you not know?
What?
Yeah, he is pop star slash politician. He's got to be multifaceted.
Yes. Yeah, I think people are moving slightly away conventional politics to introduce new people. I think this is helped by social media as well, having like pop stars, having TV personalities. Maybe if I dare mention Donald Trump, people who always had the media, they're coming into national politics. It's a global trend.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I mean, these days it's not as I think exclusive, I would say. I think everybody with a solid and honorable vision and and a sufficient amount of knowledge comes to how politics works stands a good chance. But I don't think the field is as discriminatory, I think, as it used to be. Yeah. So it's quite interesting to actually observe that. It's kind of heartening to know that despite someone's walk of life, so long as they have a vision and they're honorable and they're willing to serve, that if they can't be the king, then at least they can be factored into the equation for the betterment of the nation, for the greater good. Want to be jurisprudential about it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
When the Parliament of Uganda has like 529 parliament seats, and you elect your MPs. So it's a one-layer unitary government. Is that right? Or how is the president and prime minister selected?
Um. I said the president is based on the two-round system.
Two
And
rounds.
you're absolutely right. Yeah, the two-round system. That's what it's known as, the voting system. And you're absolutely right. Uganda has a total of 529 uh, seats. But in order to get a seat, one of those seats, you first have to have a victory at a local level. And local elections are conducted typically by what is known as the first past the post voting system, and the winning member of parliament at local level will occupy one of those 529 seats, and just use them all, and the ruling party will become that with a majority of the seats in parliament. I hope that makes sense.
So there's a two-round system to select the president. Is that right? Or
Yes, correct.
so what about the prime minister? Do you have a prime minister?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do.
How is that a ceremonial role, or is that an executive? Or
Um,
do they have executive powers? How are they selected?
no, actually, the prime minister doesn't have a um, it doesn't have a ceremonial role. They're actually quite involved when it comes to the executive arm of the
Okay.
um of the government. In earnest, when it comes to how they're elected, I think I'll have to do further research on that. But they do have they're quite involved in terms of the executive roles of the government.
Okay, because it's the same in Malaysia. We have a prime minister, so the prime minister has most of the
Okay.
powers. So they run day-to-day executive affairs, and then we have a king. So the king will be selected by the ruler, the conference of rulers of 9 states. So it's a rotational
Okay.
monarchy, and then but they
Interesting.
hold a ceremonial role in society. So they are like the supreme commander of the military. They also the head of the Islamic religion, and then they appoint the
Okay.
prime minister. So they also have a symbolic and ceremonial role in Malaysia. So the day-to-day affairs are by the prime minister. So that's the main takeaway. So I was wondering who has the main role in Uganda. Is it the president? Is it the prime minister?
Oh no, it definitely is the president, that's for sure.
That's the president. Okay. So
Yes, it
speaking about the
definitely.
president, so I think President Yoweri Museveni has been president since January. Was it like January 1986 after a 6-year guerrilla war? Do you consider Uganda to be a democratic country currently?
You pose a very interesting question. Seemingly simple, but quite quite complex. So I think I would consider Uganda to be a democratic country. It is a democracy, yes, albeit a flawed one.
Okay.
Um, there is always room for improvement. But as I mentioned earlier, there is legislation in place and bodies dedicated to perfecting this democracy, such as the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the Uganda Law Society, the Constitution itself, 1995 Constitution of Uganda itself, but to mention a few, which are all dedicated to ensuring that rule of law prevails and democracy is ultimately upheld.
Yes. Do you see any political reforms being implemented from your experience in the past few years?
Do I see any political reforms being implemented? Um, yes, I think I would. With the greater need for, or the greater urge for anti-corruption, um, you you've actually witnessed more bodies and more laws being enacted to this end. Um, like I said, you have the Anti-Corruption Court of Uganda, which was established right around 2010, and you have the Uganda Human Rights Commission. You also have the Uganda Law Society, which has undergone a ton of reforms to make sure that they can better better execute their role of lobbying the government for the better of the nation. So yes, I have seen political reforms take shape before my very eyes. However, there is always room for improvement.
Yes, for all countries, every country is a work in progress. On that
Mm,
note, maybe we can talk about some of the economic and political, geopolitical nature of investments in Africa. So, does US and China geopolitics play a role in Uganda? Because there was quite a lot of talk of the past few years. So, I think Kenya, Ethiopia, the African Union headquarters, the Grand Renaissance Dam, the Standard Gauge Railway in Kenya, as well as the Bagamoyo port of Tanzania. All of these came in with Chinese investments to improve the flow of trade and railways into
mm.
the heartlands of Africa, into the sea. Do you have any comments or thoughts on the ground in Uganda about Chinese investments? Do you think any investments are coming in to Uganda? Are there any mega projects undergoing currently in Uganda?
Uh, yes. Most definitely. We've had a continuous. I believe that we've had a continuous stream of investment. Not only from the US but from China as well. China's becoming increasingly prominent. In that sense, at least for the past few years, through what is known, I believe, as debt capital. They have injected a lot of funds into into East Africa um, for the sake of development, but it also comes at a price of perhaps them being granted land titles in exchange, a bit of a barter trade, as you will. And some find it quite controversial, and naturally, given the current state of U.S. China politics, it has. I think it's natural that the international world is slightly concerned. Um, However, I trust that Uganda will not fall victim to a proxy war between the two superpowers should one ever arise, touch wood.
Yes. For example,
Mm.
are there any specific economic projects that are undergoing? Maybe a technological park in Uganda, or any foreign investments that you would like to
Um,
mention specifically?
yes, what I do know is that China has been very instrumental in roadworks in Uganda,
Yes.
helping the nation, or at least bankrolling the building of roads and such other infrastructure. They have been extremely instrumental in that regard. So they've invested a lot in transport, I think for more than a decade, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
roadworks, most definitely roadworks, like such as the Entebbe Express Highway, I believe, which was recently finished. Yes, Entebbe is
Into the
what Entebbe Express Highway is the one that leads you that gets you to the airport a lot faster than alternative routes. So it's been a great blessing, but I believe China had a hand in that.
yes. Yes. On that note, maybe I could move on to our next question. What is your hope for the Uganda, for the future of Uganda? What do you think many people, young people, want to see change in Uganda in the future? And as well as everyone who is still keeping and watching, please, if you have any questions for Angela, please leave them in the comment section below. Angela will be so thrilled and excited to reply to any of them. As we are moving towards the final segment of today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in this far. Yes, Angela, would you like to continue?
Yes, of course. I have not one hope, but many a hope. So some of my hopes for Uganda and East Africa is a greater sense of Ubuntu, which loosely translated means humanity in Africa. I also hope for greater solidarity so that Africa as a continent can realize its fullest potential. And of course, I hope for economic progress. I believe the youth, such as myself, want to see Uganda and then East Africa where the youth is more empowered through, for instance, job creation, like I earlier hinted on, greater educational opportunities, and mentorship programs. And Dominique, if I may, this is a bit of a shameless plug moment, but if I may, the young
Yes.
East African, if I may, thank you so much for giving me the floor. If I may, the Young East African Aspiring Lawyers Network, um, of whom I'm an ambassador for, is a vehicle for change that we want to see. We, as the Young East African Aspiring Lawyers Network, pride ourselves, I beg your pardon, on youth empowerment. In a nutshell, this network is a global platform that aims to support East African aspiring law students, graduates, and young legal professions on their journeys through law school and into the legal world. We welcome articles written by those with any link to the legal profession. So, by all means, if you're interested, simply email us at eastafricanaspiringlawyers@gmail.com with a few bullet points expressing whatever it is that you'd like to write about. And you can find us at www.youngeastafricanaspiringlawyersnetwork.org. And I'll drop all this in the comment box along with our social media details. Yes.
Yes, please contact Angela if you're interested to join or write articles for the Young East African Aspiring Lawyers Network. They'll be so thrilled to accept these as well. So look out for Angela, who will drop them details at the comment section below.
Yep.
My next question would be, you talk about East Africa, so having a greater Ubuntu and humanity. So how does that tie up with this idea of East African Federation? Because I think your president as well said that I will not step down immediately. I will go back to my cows after a few more years when we set up the East African Federation. What does it mean to you?
The East African Federation, I think is something that is quite promising. Like I said, I think for me it ties into my hope of solidarity because it essentially promotes unity and collaboration. So these are the sort of things that I fully champion. Yes.
Yes, because the potential is quite huge. It's 195 million people spread across 6 East African community countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, the latest to join in 2016.
Yes.
So
Yes.
but I also see there is some feuds like Uganda or Rwanda feuding over restrictions of movement, or like trade accusations over boarding crossing disputes with Rwanda. What are relationships, bilateral ties like between Uganda, Rwanda, and other countries in East Africa? Are they conducive to forming a East African Federation? Because most countries in the world are like splitting or becoming smaller. Like you have votes for separatists in maybe in Scotland, or votes in the past for South Sudan. So countries are becoming smaller, but in East Africa, this idea is to bring together trade union, customs union, monetary union in confederation into an eventual federation. So I'm not sure if it's going against the tide of like other countries. Do you have any comments on these? Is
What I
it
will say
viable?
is that yes, I do think it's viable. I think in a way people are sort of longing for yesteryear because if I'm not mistaken, after we were released from the shackles of colonialism, a lot of these bodies that were aimed at unification were birthed, and they actually did a lot of wonders for the region in terms of encouraging trade and cooperation. And you could actually see the results. But I believe as a result of poor management, a lot of those bodies were wound up. So I think people are yearning for that sort of thing because it was working in the past, but perhaps due to poor management, it had those bodies had to be wound up, like I said. But based on how successful they were in the past, I think that they'll be really, really successful in the present in the future. I beg your pardon. Um, and yes, like I said, Uganda generally enjoys peaceful diplomatic relations with her neighbors, and that's something that I can only encourage.
Yes. Do you think there is appetite on the ground between countries, grassroots citizens, for a union between these countries? How, like you mentioned, you lived in Nairobi for a while. How similar or dissimilar are the cultures of Uganda and Kenya? Are they
um,
conducive for federation?
I I don't think that federation on that level is something that people that the civilians are lobbying for. Um, we've seen it work for many a nation, or many a region. I beg your pardon. Um, but I don't think that's something that civilians in East Africa have an appetite for as per now. As per now, I think people are quite happy to maintain a level of yeah, just to retain some sort of centralization amongst themselves in terms
Yes,
of the region.
because I've seen like news reports of them trying to draft a regional constitution by 2023, or move into a monetary union. That means the central bank centralized to dispense monetary policy across the region. But I don't think some of these things will come to fruition because of the COVID-19. And it looks as if it's a top-down kind of initiative, from what I hear from
Yes.
you. And as well as what do you think about the cultures? Are they compatible? Like you have been in Uganda, Kampala, you have been in A levels in Nairobi in Kenya. How similar are the cultures? What do you like most about each country?
I think the cultures are unique, unique in their own ways, but similar nonetheless. Lots of overlaps, I would say. Um, so let's see, just to go around the region. I think what I love most about Uganda is how close knit we are as a people. It's a very small place, so everybody does know each other, and there's a genuine sense of family, which I'll forever appreciate about Uganda, just the close knit society. When it comes to Nairobi, or rather Kenya, I really love, I really admire the work ethic of Kenyans. That's something that definitely influenced me a lot. You can just tell that they're very fast people. They walk fast, you know what I mean? They're very forward thinking. And I like that in that society, people don't put each other in boxes. You're really encouraged to exhaust all of your God-given gifts and not tie yourself down to just one, to explore all of yourself. When it comes to Tanzania, I really love how graceful the people are. I love the music. It's very sensual. And they're very, very kind people. But I really, really enjoy their music. It's very, very sensual. I'll send you some of their songs one of these fine days. Rwanda, they're very graceful people. I really admire their grace as well. When it comes to Somalia, they're extremely, extremely friendly. I have quite a few girlfriends of mine that are from Somalia and Ethiopia, and they're extremely friendly and welcoming, very welcoming, always smiling. And I really admire how they wear their culture on their sleeves. A lot of the times nowadays you find people will dress in their traditional garb when they have a function or some sort of event. But I've noticed that with Ethiopians especially, they wear their traditional dress. It's there every day for the most part, which I quite admire. So yeah, and Burundi as well, very similar to the Rwandese in terms of their gentleness. I quite admire that. But generally, I'm very blessed to say that I'm from this region. It's made me. It's molded me into someone that I can say I'm proud of if I'm being. And I mean that humbly, but I'm also grateful to all the regions around the world that have molded me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been able to travel and touch base with people such as yourself who are from different parts of the world, different walks of life. But look at how much we have in common. Look at how much we've learned
Yes.
today.
Yes.
Honestly, look at how much we've learned today. So much gratitude, much gratitude.
Yes. Okay. So we are moving on to our final question. So does Malaysia feature in Uganda or East Africa? What Malaysians known for, or do they feature in that region?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I think our ties go back. Yeah, we've had substantial ties for a substantial amount of years. For instance, in 1998, Malaysia and Uganda signed a memorandum of understanding towards economic, scientific, technical, and cultural cooperation. And since then, the goals of this memorandum are being realized by way of trade in palm oil, exportation of labor to Malaysia, maybe in terms of people going for menial labor or even doctors from Uganda, as well as educational
Yes.
investments. Yeah. But aside from that, we also enjoy Malaysian Chinese food a great deal on this end, I must say. It's heavily infused in the region and is a popular choice on many occasions. I mean, just the other day it was my brother's birthday, and we had ourselves some dim sum, which I quite enjoy. And we always insist on using chopsticks, which I've genuinely always loved using. I think it's such a fun activity. So yes, Malaysia does feature. I'm happy to say, and hopefully in the future we can continue to strengthen these ties and build these bonds and this admiration for one another.
Yes, yes. I think it's so special. We get to share cultural
Mm.
exchange tonight. I learned a lot of things about Uganda, the different ethnic groups, the climate that we share that is similar, the fact that we also have like a wildlife in Malaysia, like apes, like orangutans,
Mm.
the fact that
Yes.
you have tried like foreign cuisines for your brother's birthday, and the fact that we all share the same issues in governance when it comes to development goals. So I think
Yes.
having this exchange of ideas, not just on the government level, but actually people on the ground on Facebook like us, help to bring countries far apart even closer.
Yes, indeed. Quite right, Dominic. I couldn't have put it better myself. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness me. Wow. Wow. Kuala Lumpur. There you
Yep.
go.
Yeah. This is Kuala
Now that's
Lumpur.
the city.
Yes, come and visit. And then
I definitely will. I definitely
yeah,
will. I've got my vaccines.
yep.
I'm just, yes, and you're more than welcome to always come and visit us over here in the Pearl of Africa and East Africa. We'll roll out the red carpet, you know. Mikasa is
Yes,
Ukasa. My home
definitely.
is your home. You're always welcome.
Yes. Thank you everyone for watching tonight. We are going to go very quickly through the comment section before we wrap up tonight's session. So we are going to look at a question from a second question from Dennis. I have another question for Angela, if it's all right. I was wondering if there are the other question. There are any Uganda fiction or non-fiction literature that you personally find to be a must-read? Yes.
Ugandan fiction and non-fiction literature. Yes, most definitely. There's been a continuous growth in the championing of literature in Uganda. So, for instance, you have If I Was a Boy by a one Mrs. Mpanga. The first name escapes me, but that's a really fantastic read. Then you also have a book called Incumbent by Zamzam Kasuja, which dwells on political reflections. The author is a lawyer, and this book is available on Amazon. For those of you who might be outside of Uganda and within Uganda, it's available at Aristoc and such other bookshops. So yes, so there's that. I would really encourage one to look into Incumbent by Zamzam Kasuja. That's a
Samsung Kasuja.
non-fictional. Yes, Zamzam Kasuja. I'll write it down in the comment section. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next, we have a comment from Michael. Very nice jewelry. I think that was from the 3 second snippet that you showed us.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, Michael said that. And oh yeah, one more question from then. Oh, do you know Michael personally as well?
Oh, yes, he's my cousin from Romford,
Ah, okay.
London. Thank you for
Oh, he's
tuning
in
in,
London.
Michael. Yes.
Thank you for tuning in, Michael. Shout out to Michael for being the best cousin
Shout out to
ever.
Michael and Civic, best cousin ever.
Yes. The next question is
Yes.
by Dennis as well. I noticed in Marvel's Black Panther that there is a community of Hindus in Africa. Would you happen to know the distribution of the Hindus in Uganda, and what are some of the local indigenous religions practiced in the country? So I suspect not the Abrahamic faith, but the local animistic or the local indigenous religions.
Yes. The Hindus are quite a huge community in Uganda. It's been that way for many, many years. Um, like I said, in Kenya, they're considered a tribe because of just how dominant they are in the community. So in terms of numbers, it's I can't quite quantify it, but what I will say is they're not. I wouldn't say that it's an astronomical number, um, but they hold a lot of sway in the community. Like they're very business savvy. They they do have a lot of economic power, I would say. And a lot of cultural influence as well. Actually, the school that I went to for my primary and Aga Khan is called, rather, my primary and O levels is called Aga Khan, and
Okay.
it was, yes, it was 60% Black people and 40% Asians. Yes, it was a very Asian influenced school. So that should just go to show you just how much that they're intertwined in the society. There were lots of Hindus in that school. And let's see, the local indigenous religions practice. So yes, of course, we do have local indigenous religions. Interestingly, I feel like now there's a bit of a resurgence. Before they were demonized. I think because of it was slightly a result of colonization. Some of the local indigenous religions were demonized. So even we grew up being afraid of them. But interestingly, there's been a resurgence in African spirituality. So yeah, most definitely we have what are traditionally known as witch doctors, which but I just find that term to be quite has such a negative connotation. So instead of calling them witch doctors, I prefer to call them just traditional healers.
Yes.
So yes, so it's not something that I practice myself, but I don't demonize it either. I think at the end of the day, it's really about the energy that you're putting into something, because even religion itself, traditional religion, whether Christianity or whatever, I think everything has a good side and a bit of a bad side. So it really depends on how you're harnessing it. So I feel as though if you're using local religion for good, then have at it. I don't necessarily see why we should demonize the practices, or at least all of the practices of our ancestors.
Ancestors.
I really think the ancestors. I know. I think it really just depends on the intention with which you're practicing these things. That's what matters the most to me. And thank you so much for that the compliment as well, Mr. Dennis Ong. I really really appreciate it.
Yes. I would like to know more about indigenous religion. How is it practiced? Is it in Africa? I mean, sorry, not Africa, but just Uganda then.
Mm. So I think it varies from maybe tribe to tribe, but typically, you've got the traditional healer or
Okay.
the traditional doctor who has a shrine. Usually, it's somewhere, in a relatively green area, sort of bushy area. But with these
Yes.
days, these guys are also stepping up their game. Some of them have offices in town.
Okay.
So some you find in the bush, some you find in the city. But so typically, you set up an appointment and you go there, and usually you sit down. So I hear. Usually you sit on the floor with them, and they ask you what it is that you would like to have done, what it is that you wish for. Usually they ask for some sort of payment in the form of maybe a livestock animal like a chicken or a goat or something like that. And then they call upon the ancestors and maybe give you advice on how it is that you should carry yourself, how it is that I'm so sorry, my dog in the background. Yeah, she's locked
At the
out.
right time, oh, when you mentioned
You're
like
locked out and
a
she was
chicken.
alive and still. I know.
Ah,
Oh, truly, that's her name. But I apologize. But so after you make the payment, they do the ritual, and then after that, they give you advice on how it is that you should maybe you conduct yourself afterwards. So some people actually have them on retainer, believe it or not. Like for instance, in South Africa, and yeah, South Africa is quite interesting because it's very cosmopolitan but extremely traditional. So you'll have maybe an established lawyer who will with a law firm who will have a traditional healer on their retainer,
oh
like
wow.
a yearly fee. That's how much they believe in it. But
Yes.
so that's how local traditions, or rather religions, manifest themselves. So like I said, no, it's a judgment-free zone here, but I would encourage anyone, so long as you're doing it with good intention. I think that's what matters the most.
Yes,
Yeah,
I can relate 100% because in Malaysia, we
yeah,
also have spiritual healers. We also have indigenous religions. So when I mentioned East and West Malaysia, right? So in the East Malaysia, we
yeah.
have two states. So the Kadazans are the majority ethnic in Sabah, and then you have the
Okay.
Ibans, who is the majority ethnic in Sarawak. So both of these people, they are considered Dayaks. So
Yeah,
the Ibans are Sea Dayaks, the Bedayos are Land Dayaks. So this is Sarawak, and then the Kinabalu. So I mentioned just the Kadazan people. So they are coming from the highlands. So highlands and lowlands people. So Kadazan means highlands, Dusun means
okay.
lowlands. So all of them have a traditional religions as well. So in the past they used to worship maybe the mountain Akinabalu in Sabah. So that's the
Wow.
highest peak. So that they consider it the sacred place of the ancestors. When the people die, their spirits rest there. But that's also a place where everyone in Malaysia might consider climbing the mountain as an expedition once in their life. So for some of us,
Wow.
it's a recreational activity, but for the tallest mountain in Malaysia, in Kinabalu, it's a resting place for ancestors. So, I mean, we have so many overlapping religions as well. Then maybe the Ibans in Sarawak I mentioned, they have harvest festival, so they pray to a god of the harvest, so to give
Wow.
them a good harvest, and then they celebrate by wining and dining. And the mainstream in West Malaysia, the races are the Chinese and Malays. They might be Muslims, they might be Buddhists or Christians, but they also might subscribe to more indigenous cultural practices that might be not puritanical religion as well. Like the Muslims might have
Okay.
community healers, like you mentioned, to ward off bad spirits, and this might not be 100% based on Islam, but it may be based on community, tradition. And the Chinese, we have something called feng shui, so that's like geomancy, the directions, the
Oh,
energy, the
feng
negative and
shui.
positive. And that's not a Buddhist, technically it's not a Christian, but some people subscribe to it on a small level. So I mean, some people
Wow.
might have religion, but also have cultural practices in their head, in their background, like something they inherit from their ancestors. Because I think not traditional Africans as well as Chinese, like Malaysia and myself, we practice traditionally ancestor worship. So this has been some of the cultural practices that we shared in different places.
Wow. You know what, Dominic? I really, really admire that you're so educated on your history, your heritage. Now that's empowerment to me. That is empowerment. And yes, I really implore, people on the continent or Africans who might be in the diaspora to do the same, know thyself, respect your ancestors, because, they I don't believe that they were daft people, and what they did worked for them for the most part. So I think we should try and look at some of their practices with a bit more reverence. I think there's a lot to be learned, and we can choose what to take from it and transpose it into how we live our lives today for the betterment of ourselves and society as a whole. So I really am learning a lot. Thank you so much for that insight. Fascinating.
Likewise, Angela, so fascinating. I've covered Malaysia. You have covered 4, 5, 6, 7 countries. Even Miza Koleo, she dropped a comment. Maybe you want to highlight it, Miza Koleo. Love this sharing session. Maybe if Sean is, yep. Maybe Angela, you can do a shout out to Miza, a shout out to your friends and family, all our friends and family still watching today. Before we wrap up tonight's show, what is your message?
Of course. Well, I think my message ultimately is peace, love, unity, and respect for one another, despite of the walks of life that you might have come from, despite where it is in the world that you hail from. Because I believe that there's a lot that we can learn from one another and use what it is that we learn another to essentially better ourselves and in turn better society. So that is my message for today. And in terms of shout outs, I would like to first off give my shout out to you, Dominique Wong. Thank you so much, number one, for being such a dear, dear friend. Thank you. I mean, this gentleman right here has shown me nothing but kindness from the day that we met, and it really has impacted me as a person. So I'm really blessed to have met you. Thank you so much for inviting me onto this fantastic platform. I'm really, really proud of you, and I trust that it will just keep going from strength to strength. So shout out to you, Dominique Wong. I'd like to give a shout out to the big man upstairs, God, of course. And I'd like to give a shout out to the Young East African Aspiring Lawyers Network, and my friends who are within that network, such as Sheba, Ganyana, Tona Kato, Lucy Mutawe, some of my girlfriends, Roberta Chisubi, who have really helped me along in preparing for this live and promoting it. Yes, and I'd like to also thank my friends and more of my friends and my family. So I'd like to encourage everybody to please visit our website at www.YEAALN.org, and please follow us on the socials. I have linked the details in the comment box. So yes, please join in. Please join in as soon as you can. We'll be happy to have you on board. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Tonight's episode is Kampala to Kuala Lumpur, Swahili, Ugali, and Inside East Africa. So what we try to do is to talk about the different regions as well as the different subcultures and cultures of Uganda and all her neighboring countries. Try to draw parallels between Malaysia in Southeast Asia with Uganda. And on that note, I think we have learned many things from our speaker today. We apologize for that slight video technical delay. It was unavoidable. It was working previously and then it did not recently. But everything, all's well, ends well. So I'm glad
Amen.
we carried it tonight. Asante Kwa Kwangalia. Thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for spending your
Thank you
weekend with
so
us.
much.
Please follow, subscribe Angela Mugale and Dominique Wong, The Weekend Show. We look forward to seeing you on our next show very soon. Please tune in to us. Stay in touch, like and subscribe. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. God
Bye-bye.
bless. Bye. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.